Let's be innovative. Let's challenge the norm. Let's raise the bar. Let's be the elite.
Lionheart returns debuting its new championship format. For the first time, Lionheart's best will battle in a multi-class format featuring BMW's all-new M-Hybrid V8 and M4 GT3 machines. 55 drivers will face off in the ultimate test in the ultimate driving machine. 18 races at the world's most demanding road courses where traffic takes on a whole new meaning. This year, Lionheart will crown 2 champions, whose name will be etched into the Lionheart history books. Find out next. The Buttkicker Sportscar Championship, presented by BMW Performance Driving School, starts now. The new era of Lionheart started with some bumps, but through all the drama saw 3 stand tall in the first round of the Buttkicker Sports Car Series. The paddock flies across the pond just a week later to do it all again, this time in the fearsome Ardennes. Welcome to Spa-Francorchamps and welcome to the Gomez Sim Industries Grand Prix of Spa, presented by Next Level Racing. Hello everyone and welcome back to RaceSpotTV and coverage of the 2023 Buttkicker Sports Car Series. The Lionheart Racing Series is powered by HyperX, makers of premier gaming gear like the legendary ultra-comfortable Cloud line of gaming headsets. Whatever you play, however you play, HyperX knows we're all gamers. My name is Arjuna Kankipati, delighted to be joined alongside in the RaceSpotTV commentary booth once again by the one and only Andrew Kinsella. Don't forget you can follow along with live timing and scoring by heading on over to RaceSpot.tv/timing2. Let's dive straight into our BMW Performance Driving School pre-race show because, Andrew, what a blockbuster opening 90 minutes of action we had back at the bumpy Sebring International Raceway, and it was really a testament to what we're going to expect over 18 races here in 2020-23. Our Next Level Racing schedule has so many worldwide tracks for us to go and ring ourselves around, and where better to go after Sebring than to maybe the most famous track of them all up here in the Belgian mountains.
It was an incredible way to start the season, Arjuna, and I can't wait to see what they do in this follow-up here. As you say, it's a world-class facility here in Spa-Francorchamps, but what a difference that a week will make as well for these drivers. The bumpy twists and turns of Sebring give way to the long, flat straightaways of Spa-Francorchamps, where power and speed are going to be the name of the day, and tire management and pit strategy are also going to play a huge part in this race today.
It is a very long track, and I think the pit strategy here is going to be quite intriguing, especially given how traffic might play out. That was a look at the schedule, but let's run you down through the points very quickly, of course, knowing that the points are basically as they finished last time out with only one round in the books. And Austin Young was the blockbuster driver in the LMDh class in that brand new BMW M Hybrid V8 as we take a look at these driver standings presented by the BMW Performance Driving School. Marius Valiokis in his race clutch entry was able to get up to second, while Adam Blocker had a pretty decent recovery drive, all things considered, to be able to scramble third in the points. John Bader for Alexander Van der Sant effectively tied for fourth position with Caleb Bentley, Chris Fowler, David Siwa, Matt Taylor and Tyler Graf through the rest of your top 10. The one thing that we'll note after last week though, Andrew, is the reality that Austin was fantastic, but it's a fixed setup competition and a lot of the drivers have been talking about some of their difficulties getting up to speed.
Absolutely. A fixed setup means that you're not necessarily driving a car that's set up to cater to the way that you like to drive. So a lot of these drivers are having to adapt their driving styles just a little bit to fit the setups that are being produced for the Lionheart series. So I think it's been a bit of a learning curve, and I think Austin Young has so far been the best of the bunch at learning these setups. But the question is, who will be able to step up here today, and will we have someone different at the top of these standings by the end of today?
I think this braking in this LMDh has really been one of the crucial things, and was something we'll see how drivers adapt here today as well. Here's a look at the GT3 standings, again presented by the BMW Performance Driving School. Remember, this is split into Pro and Am, and well, across a Pro and Am, it didn't matter. Sean Campbell waltzed away from the field. He was, 30-odd seconds clear come the time the checkered flag dropped, and even though Joshua Chin did a great job to be able to fight his way back on forward to be able to be tied on points with Ryan Otis, ultimately Sean Campbell looked like he is going to take some beating. Miguel Vigo will hope to get some better luck, while in the AM Championship, Chase Wilson and Chris Staples were both inside of your top 10 overall, and expect them to continue their strong run in the championship. And the exciting thing about Pro and Am, Andrew, is we get to talk about drivers fighting all and up and down through a large GT3 field.
Absolutely. Pro and Am means that every position matters, whether you're fighting for first or for 15th, because you might just be fighting with someone in a different class than you, or you might be fighting for very valuable points, particularly if you're in that AM class, where you have the likes of Chase Wilson and Chris Staples cracking the top 10 last week, but that might not happen every week here. It's going to be very interesting to see how this AM, especially the AM Championship especially, plays out.
Talk to you then about your HyperX team standings, where, well, in the Powerslide Motorsports camp, there's no bias in this commentary booth, but they're on top in the LMDh Championship, so we can talk about what a great job they managed to do, with Alexander Van der Sant having to come through the pack and Adam Blocker having to come back through the pack. Hydro Race Geodesic Racing Team, though, will be one to watch, although interestingly, that's not the one where Austin Young is racing. He's in the top 5 all by himself in the team championship. When you go over to the GT3s, it's Synergy Motorsports that run 1 and 2 in a championship across of all classes that runs with 2 driver pairings. So very excited to see how this team championship ends up playing out. Let's talk to you about some Gomez Sim Industries series details, because it's the debut series for this butt kicker sports car series, as we compete with the brand new BMW M Hybrid V8, as well as now a proven GT3 car in the form of a BMW M4 GT3. We mentioned it before, custom fixed setups, all built not by Andrew Kinsella anymore, but now built by the Majors Garage. And we've got cash and prizes that tot up to just about $18,000, and that includes for both our LMDh and GT3 champions to walk away with a BMW M4 GT4 experience at the BMW Performance Driving School. That comes after the conclusion of 18 90-minute time races, where we have live race control to talk about. And that's an exciting thing, Andrew, because with multi-class traffic, we saw plenty of chaos last time, and race control definitely had to keep their eye on things.
Absolutely. Live race control is almost necessary in a series like this. You really need that extra aspect of having the stewards on hand. Even just organizing the starts in these races isn't necessarily the easiest thing to do, so having the live race control element just brings that added amount of control, and it was controlled chaos, we'll say, last time out.
If Sebring is a tough round 1, at least Spa is a little bit more open in some ways. And so let's talk about some arena track analysis, because in the 100+ years of racing here up in the Ardennes, almost every type of car has challenged itself around, whether it be open wheel, endurance prototypes, tin tops, you name it. And the most interesting thing is, though, even though a lot of people talk about Eau Rouge and Radeon being so fearsome, especially in a GT3 car, it may not be the scariest corner. That might come over at Blanchimont, but it's a 2-kilometer run out of the turn number 1 exit at La Source before you then get onto the brakes at the end of the Kemmel Straight, and it's a climb all the way up the hill, even after you crest up the top at Radeon as well. Andrew mentioned it before, LMDh fuel window. It's a little bit firmer this time around. 18 laps there, GT3's 15 laps, when the pit lane delta looking to be about 16 seconds here. It's 7 kilometers this track. It's going to be a big difference as to when you're able to cycle your way back out into clean air.
Absolutely. So just because we have that tighter pit window with a long lap here, it doesn't mean that fuel strategy and pit strategy isn't going to be important. As you say, where you cycle out of the pits is going to be very, very important. We saw that at Sebring, where sometimes drivers would cycle into clean air, sometimes they would cycle into dirty air and into traffic, and it would just ruin their pit strategy, and there was positions won and lost every pit cycle. So I think that's going to be even more important here. You want to be able to come out in relatively clean air, but at the same time, with the long straights that you talked about, Arjuna, you also want to have some draft if you're coming out as well. So it's going to be interesting to see who does the best job of negotiating this tricky pit window here.
One final thing to show you then, and that is your track itself. A look from up above, carving our way through the mountains, and it's plenty of elevation change here. In Stavelot, there is a corner also named Stavelot, although corner names here at Spa-Francorchamps more of a suggestion than anything else at the end of the day. From the lowest point to the highest point, about 102 meters of elevation change, and of course most of it comes at what is now a expanded Eau Rouge and Radeon complex, that of course in the real world. And one thing you and I, Andrew, were talking about just before we went on air is the fact that now there's plenty of gravel all around this track, and so as drivers get out underway for qualifying, one, they don't have to worry about kicking up any of that gravel, but two, it's going to be a factor as well when we go 3 wide with some of that traffic.
Yeah, we're fortunate here on iRacing to still have the paved over runoff areas, so there's a lot of areas for mistakes here. And we talked a little bit about the long straightaways, but there's a middle section of this track, Arjuna, that really is going to require a lot of patience from both the GT3 drivers and the GTP drivers as well, because traffic is definitely going to stack up over those long flowing corners in that middle section.
So qualifying underway, drivers get 4 laps to work their way around the circuit. They get to use them as they want. I saw Sean Campbell reset his way back to pit lane in this GT3 class, but Miguel Vigo rolls for his 3rd of the 4 attempts. Meanwhile, in your LMDh class, they are getting underway for their 4th and final flying lap here. New drivers to talk about. Aaron Morgan, well, he missed round number 1. He's here and reporting for duty from round 2 forward. We also have Jimbo Pfeiffer in our GT3 Pro class who joins us, and he's currently sitting in 11th provisionally in qualifying. Miguel Vigo, though, one of the drivers that will be most disappointed with the results coming out of Sebring. He currently sits a full half a second off of Sean Campbell, which around Spa is maybe not such a big difference, given that the lap time is 2:17. However, with the margin back to Ryan Otis, then 0.04 of a second, it shows just how dominant Campbell truly can be. Miguel Vigo will run his way to the line and will find some improvement, but still 4.5 off the pace.
Yeah, Sean Campbell is showing once again that he's got the measure of these GT3 cars, but I'm looking at that top of the order in the LMDh category here, Arjuna. It's really close between Valiokas and Young, and it didn't look like Young was able to improve on that last lap.
No, he did not. He was, half a tenth off of his best now. All 3 of the drivers inside of the top 3 spots, redundant word choice there, are done and dusted for qualifying. We still have a chance to see Baderfer, Kraus, and then maybe Blocker improve. That's inside of the top 7. Taylor Morgan still have chances as well. Baderfer finds a good 2.5 tenths, and it's enough to grab pole by 300, clear of Valiokas.
Wow, what a lap from Baderfer, and look at the top 3 of that LMDh category. There's less than 1/10 of a second separating the 3 of them on a 1 and 50-second lap, Arjuna.
Incredible stuff, and again, fixed setup competition, so there's not much that they can do, and I think in this car as well, it doesn't allow you to adjust things like the anti-roll bar, which, at least in recent years, these drivers had the luxury of doing in the IndyCar series. On board with Phil Kraus as we run our way in towards Pouhon. I refuse to call it the double gauche because you translate that from French into English and it literally means the double left, and I like my corner names to have a little bit of substance to them.
I think that's completely fair.
I'm trying to think of what's the most substantial corner name around this track. There was once a corner with literally called No Name Corner, so that's got plenty of substance.
Yeah, fortunately they were able to find a name for it here, but just riding on board with Phil Kraus, you can see just how hard he's pushing here, Arjuna. He's been trying to find some extra speed. I don't know that he's one of the drivers, I think, that hasn't quite come to grips with the setups and with driving this car. Of course, he was so dominant in the open wheel series last year, just hasn't quite found that speed, but he's looking pretty good on this lap so far.
Ooh, nasty snap there on initial entry. Yeah, he's bailed. He's come down onto what is a tricky pit lane entry, and so let's probably emphasize this a little bit. Look how deep the cones are to actually get yourself into pit lane, and so Phil Kraus does show us quite handily what that's all about. I mean, half a second at Spa with a GT3 car that has now significantly less draft, to the chagrin of many on social media. Sean Campbell's going to be tough to stop this season.
I think he is. It's just been one race and one qualifying session, but so far Sean Campbell is definitely the driver to beat at this point. As I say that, of course, he has to run wide and bail out of his lap there, but he has been showing nothing but speed throughout every practice session, every qualifying session, and we'll see if that translates to the race. But I do think that the first few corners is going to be the best bet for someone to try and get in front of him, maybe hold him off for a few laps here.
The Synergy Motorsports number 95 of Ryan Otis, who ran quite strongly last time out at Sebring, our 2021 Lionheart Retro Series champion, comes to the line, I think, just getting some final laps in practice under his belt. With 60 seconds left to go, I only think a handful of drivers are still on track, and none of them are looking like they are going to see any sort of an improvement. One of the talking points coming into this race, going out of the last round as well, was start zones, and the fact that the GT3 cars start at the very same time as the LMDh cars, Andrew. And so sometimes it does compromise your GT3 pole position winner. Sean Campbell, though, knows he can fight back if he does get compromised.
Yeah, I think this start in particular will be one to watch, Arjuna, because if the practice start was any indication, they'll be coming right in to the bus stop chicane for their green flag, so it could produce some very interesting three-wide situations.
Oh, don't say three wide, because we barely got through all the drama on the bumpy Sebring International Raceway. This is a smooth surface at Spa-Francorchamps, and it invites you into some moments of chaos. Plenty of those old school F1 fans will remember back in the day with Ricardo Zonta getting split down the middle with Mika Hakkinen and Michael Schumacher going around the outside. We'll see exactly how crazy some of our LMDHs want to take it, because the first time through traffic is always the craziest. We're ready to go, though, with round number 2 of the Butt Kicker Sportscar Championship. It's time to run you down through your Butt Kicker starting grid for the GSI Grand Prix of Spa. It's John Baderfer that makes it Hydra Race Geodesic Racing back-to-back on pole position, and it's 158.893 that sees him grab that top spot. Marius Valiokos will be alongside, though, in that race clutch number 23. Austin Young, the dominant winner back at Sebring, will line up inside of his teammate Graham Saunders, with the Hydra Race Geodesic Racing squad showing up in force. Flynn Lazier lines up alongside Phil Kraus on row number 3, while starting back in 7th, it's Matt Taylor alongside with Adam Blocker. Michael O'Brien and Aaron Morgan complete your top 10, with Alexander Van der Stant still struggling a little bit in qualifying. He's got Caleb Bensi alongside. It's Alex Guyon and David Siroff for Synergy Lavoie Motorsports on row 7, with Barrett Rolfe inside O'Brien Beard 15th and 16th spots. It's Chris Fowler, the final driver, with the time on the board. He starts alongside Mike Rasmas in the Graphics LC car, while Tyler Graf tactically has decided he does not want to qualify. We'll see how that all plays out for him. In GT3s, it's the Sean Campbell show once again with a 2:17.386, and it's by 4.5 tenths that he'll lead us to the green clear of Miguel Vigo. Ryan Otis and Matthew Morhard for Synergy Motorsports line up alongside each other on row 2, with Eric Staropoli now having a livery on his car alongside with Brian Bennett. Back on row 4, it's Carlos Villa. Josh Chin hoping to try and have to not fight his way back up through the field. Andrew Marquez and Chase Wilson bookend your top 10, with Wilson the best of the AMs. It's Kalisto and Siefker on row number 6. Jimbo Pfeiffer on debut starts 13th inside of Dustin Wardlow, the Candyman, D-Mole, and then Chris Reagan second in AM. And, well, back on row number 8, it's Chris Staples and then James Paulson behind, with Jim Herrick and Drew White bookending your top 20. Forsyth, Luis Gonzalez, Nunez, Logan Spath, and Creighton Carter through your top 24, with Malone, Martin, Indranini, and Greenlee through your top 28. It's a stacked field of cars that's getting ready to roll themselves out onto the back straightaway for a very short formation lap, and so not much time for the drivers to get heat into their tires and get them up into those optimal operating windows. Before we get started though, as always, it's time to run you down through today's featured onboard cameras. First up, we ride with Ryan Otis, who's got Butt Kicker looking over his shoulder. Sim racing is better with the Butt Kicker. Visit thebuttkicker.com. Matt Taylor carries HyperX on board with him. Whatever you play, however you play, HyperX knows we're all gamers, and HyperX is always ready to game. And our race winner to kick off our Butt Kicker Sports Car Series, Austin Young, has Gomez Sim Industries on board with him. Makers of high-end esports equipment and controls, visit GomezSimIndustries.com. Maybe it's fitting that GSI rides on board with one of the cars that they sponsor, but Andrew, as the LMDh streak away and the GT3s get ready to roll, how are you feeling right now? Where's the heart rate?
I'd say the heart rate's pretty high at this point. We got the GTPs going into La Source, and we've got the GT3s going into the bus stop for the start. I think that there's going to be a little bit of action here, Arjuna.
Oh, you're just asking for it, aren't you? Prediction very quickly, who comes out on top in LMDh?
I'm going to go with Marius Valiokis. He's been looking really strong both in practice and qualifying.
Well, it's going to be an interesting one, that's for sure, here up in the Ardennes. Competition, commitment, excitement. This is Lionheart, and this is the start of the Gomez Sim Industries Grand Prix of Spa, presented by Next Level Racing. We're racing here at Spa with your LMDh cars already down through La Source, with a great jump from Beta for seeing him streaking on through. Plenty of checkups through the chicane though for the GT3s, as Sean Campbell now will lead them up the crest in towards La Source, as you're got almost side by side for second, with Valiokis barely hanging on from Austin Young. And now that hybrid will kick up into gear, still climbing all the way up into the end of the Lacombe chicane. Move to the outside by Austin Young, and it will be last to the late breakers if he really wants to get that one done. You can get squeezed off into the grass, but he's going to be brave enough to force Valiokis to compromise. Through Malmedy, the race clutch car just about holds on to its four wheels, but slips up into line as Graham Saunders goes on the offense.
Well, what action we have through the first half of this lap in the GTP, and then there was still a lot of action also in the GT3 category. Where Sean Campbell has come out on top there, but he's got Miguel Vigo right behind him, and there was a little bit of argy-bargy going on through that bus stop chicane, especially in the back. It looked like Brian Greenlee got in the back, and there was a little bit of a chain reaction at the back there too.
It's one of those dangers of going into a heavy braking zone at the very start of the race, with cars still yet to get their tires up to their operating window. Vigo holding on to Campbell crucially in the GT3s. Ryan Otis already 1 second off of Vigo's Hydro Race Geodesic Racing car. But speaking of Hydro Race Geodesic Racing, they're 1 and 2 now in your LMDHs, with Austin Young 1.5 seconds off the back of his teammate. Valiokis, Saunders, Lazier, Kraus, Blocker, Taylor, O'Brien all checked up behind that as they get ready to work their way up into the bus stop chicane to get to the end of lap number 1. Looked like a half dive from Flynn Lazier. Phil Kraus thought about that one as well. Somehow they're going to get through that safely, but Adam Blocker down the inside of Phil Kraus is going to get his way up to 6th.
Yeah, that was a little bit of an optimistic move there from Phil Kraus. I'd say a little bit ill-advised as well, because if Flynn Lazier was doing a half move, then Phil Kraus was only doing about an 1/8 of a move there, and it cost him because he just compromised his line through that first bus stop, and Adam Blocker right there to pounce.
Incredible stuff. And now hopefully my voice doesn't need to take such a pounding for the rest of the race, because that was lap 1. Out of an estimated 45 or so. One thing that we noted talking with some of our Powerslide Motorsports teammate is the potential, Andrew, in the LMDh class to actually come in a bit early to avoid getting latched onto the back of the GT3 cars. It's a long lap here at Spa, no matter how fast that you are, and so with the GT3s just coming out of La Source and the LMDhs down already up and through Bruxelles, there's the potential to maybe try and leapfrog that first cycle through traffic.
Yeah, you have to be very careful with your pit strategy here in terms of when you're getting held up, and there's definitely, again, that possibility that you're talking about where if you're coming up on these GT3 cars for the first time, you might be better served by just coming down, taking a little bit of an early service, maybe just going fuel only, no tires, and it'll save you some time both on pit lane, and it'll get you some open air running, and maybe the GT3s, by the time you get to them, will be just that little bit more strung out.
Something to think about, but it is, again, a 7-kilometer lap. You do not want to be hung out to dry by missing pit lane. Trust me on that one. Let's take a look at what happened to some of the drivers on the opening lap. Oh, Barrett Rolfe, tank slapper, trying to get the power down through Malmedy. He does a decent job, all things considered, to hold on to it.
It was a nice save there, but it does look like he got a little bit of damage there. Was there maybe a little bit more going on in the lap as well with Barrett Rolfe?
We're about to find out. Oh, rear end. Oh, I tell you what, whatever happened before, it was not healthy after that.
No, it certainly wasn't. And then here we have a little bit more in the GT3 back for Pujon here. And again, it's just that under braking, Arjuna. It definitely seems like these setups, it's a little bit treacherous under braking, and he just lost it coming into Pujon there.
That was Creighton Carter in the 71, who is dropped to 28th, last of the GT3s running, with Barrett Rolfe as well as Brian Beard being down in pit lane, and so I can put the 2 and 2 together. The other car that we saw mixed up with Barrett Rolfe was, unfortunately, Brian Beard, and so the 19 contingent of LMDh is whittled down already to 17. You notice that Adam Blocker has been having his fair share of internet issues. We'll track that and see how that develops. He's not typically known for having too many issues, if we can be totally fair, and so that's definitely something just to keep an eye on. Miguel Vigo has got to be concerned though, because as he works out of La Source and then blasts down 2 kilometers before he gets onto the brakes once again, he's already almost 1 full second off the back of the WMP racing car of Sean Campbell, with Ryan Otis a full 2 seconds further back.
He's done valiantly to be able to hold on to Sean Campbell for as long as he has. Oh, and that's the 54 car. Believe who is that? That's Jimbo Pfeiffer. So he was having a really strong debut. He qualified really well, but that's going to put a little bit of a damper on there as he spun in La Source.
Just listen to the cars flying over the curb. Curb usage up at the top of Camel Straight, so important. Eric Staropoli had a pretty impressive run, all things considered, in his first outing in Lionheart competition 7 days ago, and looking pretty comfortable here as well. Now, the one thing that I'm going to just emphasize, Andrew, is that Sebring and Spa, we're going to 2 tracks that are pretty common in terms of competition for plenty of these drivers, and so it's going to be interesting once we get to some of the less frequently raced tracks, how they'll fare at some of those.
You wouldn't be talking about our next round at Hockenheim, would you, Arjuna?
Maybe a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely think that it's been a good thing, a good decision from the Lionheart admin team and the series organizers to take Sebring and Spa as their first 2 rounds, because it's really allowed these drivers to start to get used to the cars, get used to the setups, because again, this is a debut series, and a lot of these drivers are actually racing these cars for the first time in as competitive a setting as this. So I think that having that familiarity with the track is really beneficial for these drivers.
So on board with Staropoli for a moment there. Starting to stretch up a little bit in your LMDh class. It's not really seen too many passes. I wonder if Blocker's internet issues are disturbing Phil Krause's momentum a little bit. It's something that you always have to get accustomed to, is the realities of internet racing, unfortunately, at times. It's not just Adam Blocker that's having these sort of issues. Clint Martin has them right now in the GT3 class as well. Well, as a driver, Andrew, what does it seem like from your perspective when you're stuck behind someone like this?
It's definitely distracting, but at the same time, a driver like Phil Kraus, he's experienced something like this many, many times before, so he's not going to be too affected. The part that really affects you is when you're trying to get around someone. If you're trying to pass them, particularly on a track like Spa, where it's really the pass is going to happen in a braking zone or down the straightaway where you're in a draft and you have to make a move. If you're not exactly certain where that driver is going to be, it makes the move a lot sketchier, as we see just through that braking zone. Basically, Kraus has to trust that Adam Blocker isn't going to make a mistake. And that's really where the danger comes in, is you just don't have the reaction time if the driver in front of you who's actually having the issues makes that mistake.
Well, I guess the one thing that you can be grateful for is at least in Adam Blocker you've got someone that you can probably trust, as David Sirois quite slow out of that final corner. Not sure exactly what's happened to him, but I guess it's probably time that we start cycling through a couple more replays that start with a look at what happened to Drew White. Again, it's GT3 cars that seem to be having the worst of it. This is coming down in towards what is now known as the Speaker's Corner, and big old tank slapper, and see ya, that car's done.
Yeah, that wasn't a braking issue so much as he just went in there a little bit too hot, over-rotated the car, and then when he caught it, it just snapped straight into the wall. He was in a one-way ticket there, so unfortunate incident there for Drew White.
See what happened as well to Jimbo Pfeiffer on debut. That's a moment of send out of the 43 of Chris Staples, and I think the AM driver likely to have race control taking a look at that.
Yeah, that'll definitely warrant a second look from race control, but so far we haven't heard any indication of anything happening there. Meanwhile, back at the front, it's John Betafor, who has got about a second and a half lead over his teammate Adam Young. Valiokis a further second and a half, 2 seconds behind Young, but they are, Arjuna, starting to catch up to the stragglers of the GT3 field.
And soon it's going to be pretty relentless, I think, within a lap or two. If you're Adam Blocker, you've got to be curious if your internet issue, or you got to be mindful, I guess, that your internet issues are also going to be a factor when you get into this lap traffic. Maybe it's also an opportunity for Kraus to be able to get past if he can do it safely. That's the operative thing, as Valiokis locks up the rears. Fortunately, Graham Saunders skates on by as Valiokis tries to spin himself back around and rejoin the racing surface. He drops outside of the top 10.
Yeah, and look at him struggle to get back going there, but I think that was Saunders basically getting a run on Valiokis and trying to put the move on the outside of the bus stop, which is a very difficult thing to do. Valiokis was trying to defend, but then Valiokis, I think, just got in a little bit too deep, and the rear end came right around on him.
Oh, live pictures. Eric Staropoli's had a bit of a moment in Malmedy. There's the replay of it, and you're right, it was just Graham Saunders really forcing Valiokis to do something, and unfortunately the something in that case was spin. Sean Campbell has broken clear of Miguel Vigo. He's now 2.5 odd seconds away at the front. Ryan Otis still 4.5 seconds further back, has got a 2-second gap. He's been able to break away from Carlos Villa, Josh Chin and Brian Bennett and a handful of others. I think mainly because they all decided to squabble a little bit before even the lap traffic decided to come and rear its head. Here's, Eric Staropoli just losing the rear by himself, and I think Matthew Morehart has nowhere to go.
Yeah, that's unfortunate for Morehart, because he is having a really strong race for Synergy Motorsports, and that's going to result in some significant front-end damage for Morehart, and hopefully not too much suspension damage for the other car there. And then I just come through on the horn drive-through for 43 Chris Staples. So you were right, that second look from race control has come through, and there's a drive-through for Chris Staples, who was, I believe, leading the AM class at the time.
I think no, Chase Wilson would have been.
Yes.
Who has dropped out of the top 10, but still leads in class. But they're scored overall in the GT3 field, so your AMs have incentive to fight with pros, don't get it wrong. LMDHs are into the thick of traffic. That was Chris Staples ducking off to pit lane to serve that drive-through penalty early. I think Adam Blocker having a pop at Flynn Lazier, and it is indeed with some traffic, and now with Lazier able to get the wider line and onto the power a bit earlier, but Blocker potentially using that hybrid to cut back underneath. That was going to be an opportunity for a moment, and while these two cycle their way on through, Phil Kraus flashing the lights, the universal sign to a GT3 car of get out of my way, I want to get through too.
Yeah, and it can be intimidating if you're not prepared for it in the GT3 class. But look at
well,
Flynn Lazier through.
That's going to be a
Radion.
slowdown guaranteed for Flynn Lazier, and well, this is where he's going to be strategic in how he serves it, and he's really going to frustrate Adam Blocker. I think this might start to kick off.
Well, the thing is, by doing that, he got about a second on Adam Blocker as Blocker tries to negotiate through, and he's got Phil Kraus right behind him as well. So it's all sort of kicking off here in this battle for 4th, 5th, and 6th in LMDh.
I'm just going to tell you that Phil Kraus has lost about 1.3 seconds estimated. Adam Blocker says 4, but his internet's been wonky, so it's hard to judge. Flynn Lazier has lost 3 seconds so far this lap. Still comparable to what your leader's been suffering. He's being hit equally hard by the traffic. It's not just being the slowdown, it's where you get hit by things at times, by pockets of traffic. And speaking of pockets of traffic, well, if there's anyone from the Hydro Race Geodesic Racing team out there getting ready for social medias, you'll love this. 1, 2, and 3 through traffic. It's 3 of their cars split by half a second.
And one of their GT3 cars is just ahead in that battle for 4th and 5th in the GT3 class as well. So all of the Geodesic Racing cars right on screen all at once.
It's a great opportunity, isn't it? I mean, meanwhile, Blocker and Kraus still fighting. I would not expect Sanders, Young, and Betafer to be fighting too hard at this stage. Surely they're just going to coast through this first cycle and then maybe play it out in a pit stop phase, but crazier things have happened, I guess. There's plenty of smoke. Flynn Lazier a bit slow off of the chicane, and now Blocker and Kraus right back in contention in a 3-way fight for position. Blocker and Kraus went either side of traffic. No, they didn't. They went the same side of traffic, but Blocker's internet connection is making things very difficult for all.
And this is where it gets really, really sketchy, is you're in a fight with the cars going the same speed and different speed, and it looks like Phil Kraus has gotten around Adam Blocker, although Blocker's tucked right up underneath that 93 car. He might just be able to come back at the 93 car in Lake Holm.
We'll see if there is going to be a dive, or if Blocker and Kraus are realizing that they're now 4 seconds off of that podium spot, and indeed I think Blocker decides discretion the better part of valor. Let's see what happens here with Nate Siefker as he gets absolutely bodied coming through Blanchimont. They tell a GT3 car, a slower class car, to run your racing line. I don't really know what much more you could ask for in that situation, and unfortunately I can't quite place the LMDh car.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where as they come right in front of Adam Blocker and Phil Kraus. That was, I believe,
it was Vigo.
That's Vigo. That was Vigo. Your second place GT3 car does a half spin right in front of Phil Kraus and Adam Blocker, and it's a miracle that we didn't have a bigger incident of that at Arjuna.
I mean, I tell you what, I cannot believe that Miguel Vigo continues to have the worst luck in the world, because he could not buy luck to start off this season so far, and I'm sure we'll get a look at exactly how that all played out. Caleb Bensi was the one that unceremoniously shoved Nate Siefker off. I don't know if everyone's going to agree with my interpretation of that one, but as a slower class car, Andrew, it's pretty clear you're told to run your racing line.
You are, but the difficult part is it's a straightaway that's basically got corners in it that are flat out. So
well, okay, Blanchimont is not flat out in a GT3 car. That is absolutely true. Terrifying, I tell you.
That is very true, but it is flat out in the LMDh or near flat out. So what you're contending with is a GT3 car that has to lift and an LMDh car that is basically going full send through there. And I think that it was just a case where both cars just misjudged the closing speed, as we see a replay of Vigo, and it's again the same thing that we saw earlier with a couple of other drivers, Arjuna. He just gets on the brakes and immediately the rear end steps out.
Well, I'm pretty sure he's actually kind of, maybe we need to take a look from up above. I would not be shocked if there's a touch of grass in play here potentially.
Well, but there's a curb there. So if anything, he just touched the curb, and in reality that shouldn't upset the car as much as it does.
Somehow they all managed to get through that without any contact, though, so that's great. Vigo only has damaged tires and now a 2-second buffer to Ryan Otis, who maybe is closing.
Yeah, it'll take a few laps here for Vigo's tires to stop yelling at him after that one, but I think that at the same time, and by the same token, he's got to get his heart rate back down after that save, because it'll be going a mile a minute at this point.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that I think someone like Vigo, who's got plenty of endurance series expertise under his belt, we've seen him in the various Ivor competitions here on RaceSpot in the past, where he can lean on some of that experience. The problem is, though, now, we're not even 20 minutes into this one, and Sean Campbell leads by almost 8 full seconds.
It's deja vu all over again for Sean Campbell in the GT3 field. He is once again just marching away, but I think that there's still a lot of battling to be had, even if it's not for the lead. We got a really good battle between Josh Chin and Carlos Villa for 4th and 5th, and they've been going at it all race long, but it's only half a second between those two. And I think that Otis, with his better tires after that Vigo slide, is going to be quickly approaching Vigo as well.
Caleb Bensi is down to pit lane, so I get the sneaking suspicion there has been a drive-through penalty to a certain team race first car.
There has been. It was the number 29 of Caleb Bensi is serving a drive-through penalty, and that's going to be very costly for Bensi, because he was locked in a battle with a number of drivers, including Aaron Morgan and a recovering Marius Valiokas, so that's going to put him right behind the 8 ball. But I will say, Arjuna, that with this being Spa and we're not using the full endurance pits here, we are only using the Grand Prix pits, so that means that it's a very short pit delta, so not as costly as it could be on some other tracks.
Which is also a point of consideration that I've heard in various series by drivers saying that, oh, a drive-through penalty at X track is different from a drive-through penalty at Y track. I see merits to the argument on both sides there, so I don't... Whatever you think, I don't really have a strong opinion either way. You know what I do have a strong opinion of, Andrew?
Is it that the Alpine or the Geodesic Racing team is dominating the LMDh class right now?
No, I get the sense that we need to tell Race Control to order them to fight right now.
I think so. I think that they're definitely being a little bit too gentlemanly, although we say that Graham Saunders is right underneath the rear wing of Austin Young here. He might be going for a little maneuver here down Blanchimont.
Well, actually last time by, Flynn Lazier was only half a tenth off of their lap time, so that is definitely a point of consideration. If that Penguin RC car latches on, they won't be able to hold the status quo as they've been able to do so far. End of lap number 10, and so just a reminder as well that our fuel window in this LMDh car was about 18 laps. For the GT3 cars, we're talking 15 laps or so, so GT3 is already past halfway. The LMDHs have just barely tickled their way over.
Yeah, but keep in mind that just like in Sebring, that is actually going to be a lot closer than you think, because the LMDHs will be probably about 2 laps ahead of the GT3 field by the time they pit. So that window is actually going to create probably a little bit more chaos than the numbers would care to admit on pit road, particularly on this pit road, which again is much shorter than one would normally see at an endurance race at Spa.
This is, well, okay, first I would just like to point out that whoever designed that endurance pit exit at Spa, what was that saying about Oschersleben? Whoever designed turn number 1 should be taken into a corridor and beaten up or something. Yeah. Same treatment to whoever designed the pit exit for the endurance layout of Spa, because it's like, all right, so you've just come over the crest of Radion, one of the most fearsome corners in global motorsports. What should we do? Let's make sure there's a car that's just getting their tires up to temperature, emerging right into your path.
I see nothing bad ever happening out of that, Arjuna.
Well, you know the worst thing, shockingly, Kevin Estre got blamed for exiting pit lane and crashing into someone. I'm just sitting here going, as a driver, what do they expect you to do? To just park on the exit? We'll get to the top of the hill and we'll talk about it once again. But I just think it's preposterous.
It is definitely one of the odder pit exits, but the problem is, of course, where else could you have them possibly exit? Because they do have to rejoin at a certain point.
Yes, no, there's a reason why it cuts in that way, and they've done their best to try and make it a bit better. I'm just saying it's no excuse.
Yeah,
Absolutely
I'm
no
just saying that the
excuse.
bottom of Eau Rouge is not the place to have them enter either.
If we want maximum chaos, it might be.
Well, then the current layout isn't that bad either.
No, it's not.
If you're going for chaos,
it's
so
not maximum chaos. Okay, so here's what we talk about. You can see on the left side of the screen, that's the pit exit, and so just there, that's where they decide they want to put the pit exit. It's baffling. Anyway, we'll stop that rant because I guess we can start the rant about the many different corner names that we have here at Spa. Because we've talked a lot about, Andrew, how corner names are better than numbers.
they are, for sure.
But it doesn't help when every corner's got about 2 different names. So let's jump on board with the race leader, John Baderfer. Now, coming down the hill, is this Bruxelles? I've heard a couple of different names for this one in the past. Now, is Bruxelles or Rivage? I think that's the one. Now, is this no name or speaker's corner or just a corner with literally no name? There's plenty more names for that corner. Then, this is Pouan. It's not the double ghost. We don't need to just make literal corner names appear out of nowhere. Now we come into, well, is it Piff Paff? Is it Fanya? As John Baderfer has to get off into the grass. He doesn't care about corner names. He wants GT3 cars to maybe give him a bit more space.
Yeah, he's got bigger things to think about right now, Arjuna, than corner names.
Oh, I got a bit scared for him there. And I tell you what, it's checked him up into the path of Austin Young, who might decide this is the right time to have a crack at his teammate.
Yeah, I think that so far the teammates have been playing really nice with each other and not making any moves, but I think that as the fuel stint sort of wears on, that might start to end, as that was not the time to make a move, as there was a GT3 car on the exit there.
I mean, they're definitely not looking like they're taking it easy, that's for sure. In terms of lap times, they're still amongst the quickest. Lazier starting to drop off a little bit over the last couple of laps.
Oh,
and Adam
Blocker's
Blocker,
in.
I was wondering, because it might be a good call to try and get out of this trouble, and Adam Blocker decides to try and come in a bit early.
Yes, and I think that it might be also the case of taking a little bit less fuel and possibly doing a little bit of tire strategy, because one of the things with this LMDh is, depending on how much fuel you're taking on, it can sort of dictate your tire strategy as well. If you're taking on less fuel, you might want to do only 1 axle worth of tires, or maybe no tires at all. I think Adam might be going for 2 here.
Adam Blocker's having his internet issues, but 15.3 second stop, I think, validates what you're saying likely about the 2 tires. Now, we'll see how it fares out for him and where he plays out in traffic as well, because I think that's the most important thing. He's been spat out into relatively clean air. He does have David Sirra right behind him, but could be worse places in the world to be, given how congested the track still is.
Absolutely. I think this was exactly what Adam Blocker was hoping for. He's going to use the little bit fresher tires and that clean air to hopefully put in some lap times and maybe get around Flynn Lazier through some pit strategy rather than getting around him on track.
The traffic giveth and the traffic taketh, and it's just given back to John Baderfer. Austin Young checked up through the Piff Paff by some GT3 machines. It will allow Baderfer to slide to the inside of Stavilo as they begin to climb up in towards Blanchimont. That margin now checked up a little bit once again. It's not always an advantage to be leading the train, that's another thing. Fuel mileage can play a smaller difference than just meaning that you can come in on the same lap as the cars in front of you, but put in a little less fuel, and so for Young and Saunders, might not be the worst case in the world, as Flynn Lazier, well, for a moment he was having internet issues like Blocker, but now he's got to worry about Phil Kraus getting on his case.
Yeah, Lazier really got checked up through the bus stop, and that's allowed Phil Kraus right on the back of him. He's not going to make a move through La Source. Looks like that Kraus is sort of just content to stay behind Lazier at this point in the race. And I do wonder, like you mentioned that the window is pretty much set in stone for these LMDHs, but I do wonder just because as you were mentioning, there is benefit to be had with, that was a big impact for the GT3 car that we're seeing on screen. But there is a benefit to be had in terms of fueling time in these pit stops. So if you're one of these drivers who's second, third in line, there is a benefit to saving fuel and just sort of sitting and coasting for this first stint.
Well, Saunders has got it in front of his teammate Young, so he now rides in second as there's a bit of GT3 swap around in front of them, and Austin Young almost cleans up that red GT3 car for good measure. We did see Cyril Graf on pit lane, and they're going a bit longer than what we saw out of Blocker, so Blocker bites the bullet on the shorter pit stop now. It will cycle back around come the second phase potentially. And 1.5 seconds now the margin at the very front. Josh Chin has broken away from Carlos Villa. Matthew Morhart, who might have some damage of course on the front after he ran himself into Eric Staropoli, who was having his spin in front of the Synergy Motorsports number 62, is right on the case of the 46 as they work their way up into the bus stop.
This is the tricky part of the race for the GT3 cars, is now they've got to be thinking about their fuel strategy and exactly when they're going to come in, because again, we've heard a number of times how the draft effect has been lessened for these GT3 cars. That also affects their fuel economy and their ability to save some fuel in traffic, particularly on the long straights here. So, we've got Graham Saunders coming down pit lane this time by, so he's covering off that strategy from Adam Blocker right now.
So an opportunity to maybe try and leapfrog his teammates with a bit of an undercut as well.
Oh, but he missed his pit.
And it's not the first time we've seen that this season, unfortunately. Happened to a couple of the drivers back at Sebring. So important to minimize your mistakes in what can be such a crucial phase of the race. Now remember, it was 15.3 seconds for Blocker. Well, Saunders blows past that, stationary for 21 seconds and counting, and it's going to be 24.1 by the time he gets away and rolls himself back out onto track. Blocker is away and clear, but again, cycles are going to come back and forth in terms of pits here.
And that's going to be 4 tires there for Graham Saunders, so that's why the Blocker was only on the jacks for about 15 seconds. So that was basically 1 axle that you can get done in that time. But because in the LMDhs they change tires 1 axle at a time. So that second axle is why Graham Saunders took that much longer.
So Razmas now runs in front. Ooh, that's Caleb Bensi running a bit slowly.
That's going to create a little bit of chaos here through Bruxelles.
As Razmas gets the elbows out down the inside. Bensi's having none of it though. If he's just had an issue, doesn't seem like he's let that affect him, and that poor GT3 car gets scared off into the grass with its right sides as Blocker takes that opportunity to slip on past the 68.
Yeah, Blocker's by Rasmus, but I don't think that Bensi is going to be quite as courteous as Rasmus was there, but they've got a lot of GT3 traffic as well. So this is the part where the pit cycle sort of gives and takes away as Blocker nearly gets in the back of Bensi there.
Yeah, and I think that's really all cost them a bunch of time as Badefer and Young don't respond to the call from Graham Saunders, who's down the inside of the 54 of Jimbo Pfeiffer as they work their way on through. That's a slow Mike Rasmus, and that's a slow GT3 car.
Yeah, I think that there was a little bit of an incident coming out of that corner there, Arjuna.
That's Craig Forsyth, as Carlos Villa is up on the jacks for the GT3 class, and so their cycle maybe starts on that 14. Remember, Carlos, I don't want to be too harsh maybe, but did struggle a little bit with tire conservation back at Sebring. Here's what happened to first Caleb Bensi, and then we'll go pick up, and this is what happened to the rest, and that was all by himself, and well, good job by the rest to avoid.
And a nice save as well. You can very easily spear off into that inside wall, and Caleb Bensi did well to recover there. And you see Mike Rasmus get really squirrely coming out of the corner there, and the GT3 car just, I think, a little bit of an overreaction, because you basically have to get on the brakes when you're not expecting to, and it just spears him into that inside wall, and that's going to be some pretty major damage to the GT3 car of Craig Forsyth.
May have been doing the thing where you're looking at your fuel numbers or something as well, trying to decide, okay, have I got some clean air to go into, something like that. Unfortunately, it was a big slap into the wall for Craig Forsyth in the 40 Simware car. We rejoin the fight now for what is effectively 4th position. Circa pit stops. Lazier and Kraus are fighting Adam Blocker, who has now been out on track for 3 laps and counting after coming down on towards the pit lane. Blocker last time by did a 2:03.8. Of course, traffic plays a part there, while Phil Kraus did a 2:02.9. Lazier did a 2:04.74. Just goes to show you that it's so hard to really judge what's happening in terms of performance based on lap times.
It really is, and it's so affected by lap traffic as well. If you catch a car at the wrong point in time, suddenly you've lost 3 or 4 seconds in one set of corners. So it's really difficult to judge performance at this point. I do think that the Geodesic Racing team is the team to beat at this point. That being said, if Blocker can make the strategy work, get some more clean air, there might be something to be said to having that lesser pit time that he had and going with that strategy. So it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out. Meanwhile, Flynn Lazier is really coming under fire from Phil Kraus, as he has been for a number of laps, but I do think that Kraus is starting to get a little bit more urgent, and it's one of those situations, Arjuna, where I think if you can get around Lazier before the pit stops, if you're Phil Kraus, you really need to do that, because having a clean pit in here is very important.
You definitely do not want to follow someone down to pit lane here, in my opinion. And so as we're on lap 17, maybe we will see Phil Kraus elect to bail this time by. You did notice Alexander Van der Sant was in front of them. He came down and had a bit of a lengthier pit stop, so not sure if he had incurred a bit of damage at any point here through the course of the race. But after an impressive drive up through the field for Van der Sant in our opening round of the campaign, it's a lot more difficult of a second round.
Yeah, Van der Sant has had a little bit of issues over the course of this race. Looks like he did come down much earlier than we were expecting. He was all the way back at lap 8, and I do think back on lap 7 he had a little bit of an off that caused him to have some damage that had to be repaired, so that's why he's so far back right now. Well,
ultimately, a couple of drop rounds in the championship to factor in as well, and so that's not the worst case scenario, I guess. Meanwhile, Sean Campbell stretching the limits of the track potentially, but stretching his gap at the front equally as well. It's now 10.5 seconds, and we are just over 30 minutes into this one, as that will sequence the start of pit stops for your leaders. Betafer and Young right on cue, coming together. Lazier comes in with them at the end of lap number 17, but it's going to be Phil Kraus in the private label team lap number 91 that goes that extra lap.
And it doesn't surprise me that Kraus does something different here, tries to stretch it just that little bit more. This is going to be interesting to see whether the undercut or the overcut will work in the Kraus versus Lazier battle. Meanwhile, it'll also be interesting to see where these two Geodesic Racing team drivers come out in relation to their teammate Graham Saunders, who, don't forget, came down pit lane a little while ago. It looks like Saunders might just have a little bit of an advantage here, having been on fresh tires for so long.
I guess it also depends how it all cycled out, but he will power around the outside and boost himself down the hill on the entry in towards Eau Rouge and take the net race lead. It's going to be a full second plus that Graham Saunders will hold as they crest themselves and rise up towards the Lecomte chicane, but still one more pit stop to go. Saunders 2 seconds shorter, crucially as well. And so maybe now for Betafer and Young, it's time for the roles to get reversed and for them to sit and get towed by Saunders in the number 100, and for Betafer and Young to bide their time.
And this is the part of the race, as we see a little bit of a swap for position in net race, second and third there. That looked like it was Young getting around Betafer. So Betafer, who had led for so long in this race, suddenly finds himself running third of the Geodesic Racing team drivers.
Gotta wonder how he's going to be feeling with dirty air as well. These cars have downforce, but limited downforce. Remember, LMP won lap times at the Circuit de la Sarthe for 3-minute 15s or so quicker in qualifying and when drivers really push the limits of traffic. We're talking about LMDh cars that are likely to do closer to 330s at the Circuit de la Sarthe. It's not insignificant. That's closer to LMP2 speed going back 5 or so years. Phil Kraus will come in at the end of lap number 18. Crucially, where is that going to cycle him relative to the others? Taylor, Valiokas, O'Brien, they all go to lap 18 as well and dive down onto pit lane.
And once this cycle runs through, Adam Blocker will be your net race leader. But again, he's on those older tires, at least on one of his axles here, Arjuna. So it'll be interesting to see if he'll be able to hang on, because it looks like Saunders is really starting to run him down, only 2 seconds back from Adam Blocker, who will be your net race leader when this all cycles through.
And so he will take the lead. Valiokas joins the rest of the LMDh contingent on pit lane. There's Flynn Lazier. Phil Kraus has yet to drop and roll. Lazier was stationary for 26.4 seconds. For Phil Kraus, it's going to be an identical 26.4 seconds, and as much as he's going to try, he's going to have to fight his way to get back into contention here as they roll themselves out and off of pit lane. Clinton Martin, by the way, exit of the Lacombe chicane in towards Malmedy. Loops his 49 back out onto track.
Yeah, that's one of the more friendly places to go off, because rejoining tends to be a little bit easier over there, but definitely not the ideal scenario for Clint Martin. But here comes the Geodesic Racing team, all hunting down Adam Blocker. And if you're Adam Blocker, I think you were hoping for just a little bit more separation. As we see the replay here, looks like he just gets a little bit too much of the curb on the outside. Ooh, that's actually a big impact into the wall with the front end of his car there. He'll be lucky if that car is still steering straight.
And well, fortunately, he's not the one that's taken the most significant of dramas in the GT3 class, because Luis Gonzalez Nunez has just retired. What's happened to him? Well, he runs wide over the exit of Pouon, and that's self-inflicted in that SimRace247.com car. That was a nasty old hop that you are never meant to take.
Yeah, that's a couple of big incidents right in a row for GT3 cars, and this is one of those things where that's just circuit familiarity. You know, if you've been around Spa enough, that there's that big bump as you transition from the sort of the painted green to the curbing there, and it just catches Luis Gonzalez Nunez out there. He really should have avoided that area entirely, but it looks like he just pushed a little bit too wide, kept his throttle in it too much, and he paid the price for it.
Well, what an interesting start to round number 2 of this Butt Kicker Sports Car Series. We thought the bumps of Sebrings would deliver thrills and spills, but our trip to the Ardennes has been equally exciting. Don't go anywhere here on RaceSpotTV. We've gone past the first cycle of pit stops, but the geodesic train is hunting down Adam Blocker at the front here in the Ardennes Mountain for your Gomez Sim Industries Grand Prix of Spa, presented by Next Level Racing. The run to the checkered flag coming up next. Welcome back to RaceSpotTV and the Butt Kicker Sportscar Series in 2023. A pass for the lead at the front of the Gomez Sim Industries Grand Prix of Spa, presented by Next Level Racing, as Austin Young has race-winning intentions on his mind. He has gotten past Adam Blocker and is running away from his Hydra Race Geodesic Racing teammates here in the Ardennes Forest. Hello everyone and welcome back. My name is Arjuna Kankipati. Delighted to have your company here on this Monday evening alongside with Andrew Kinsella. Andrew, what a fascinating race it's been so far, and we come back right into what might be the most crucial phase of the race. Austin Young in his quest to break clear of Graham Saunders and John Badefer. Adam Blocker in his quest to play a surprise strategy on Flynn Lazier and Phil Kraus. We'll get Andrew in a few moments' time, some technical issues there, but my days, what an exciting start to the championship that we have had. We'll try and dial up Andrew Kinsella again. There we go, we can hear you now.
All right, we're back here, Arjuna, and you're absolutely right. This is where the strategies are all sort of converging into one, and Adam Blocker has been reeled in by the Geodesic Racing team, and one of them has gotten past, but the crucial part I think that I wasn't really expecting is that Sanders and Badefer haven't been able to reel in Blocker with quite the same veracity as Young was able to. And Sanders' tires, if I'm looking at this right, they're falling off almost as much as Adam Blocker's has been, as that was a very dangerous maneuver that Adam Blocker had to pull off, trying to pass a GT3 car through Eau Rouge and Rowdy on there. That's not for the faint of heart, and that was one of the Geodesic Racing teammate cars there in the GT3 category, who I'm sure didn't necessarily make it as easy as he could have been, as Phil Kraus is looking on the outside of Flynn Lazier in a Lake Home.
Yeah, but again, this is such a brave move, and it takes the other car to concede, and that's what Flynn Lazier in the Penguin RC car elects to do. Let's give you a quick rundown of your top 10 in each of your classes, especially since we're about halfway through the cycle. Like we mentioned, it's Austin Young that leads in your LMDhs, winning at Sebring, broke on to the scene in this Butt Kicker Sports Car Championship. It's Adam Blocker, the multi-time Lionheart Open Wheel Series champ that currently runs in second, although likely not for much longer, because both Graham Saunders and John Badefer in the identical Hydra Race Geodesic Racing machines currently sit third and fourth positions. Phil Kraus has gotten in front of Flynn Lazier, and it's taken quite a while, but now the private label Team Hype driver leads from that number 4 as they work their way closer and closer to potentially cycling up into the quest to try and get in front of Blocker. Marius Valiokas in the race clutch, number 23, started on the outside of the front row, but got a little bit swarmed on the start. He's down in 7th position, but has some company in the form of Michael O'Brien, the first of the Graphics LC contingent, where you've also got Matt Taylor, Aaron Morgan in your top 10 in points, so top 10 in class. Graham Saunders officially is now past Adam Blocker, likely to start extending a gap, and maybe we'll see John Badefer get on through as well. But are we 3 wide actually for a moment here? I think we are. We are 3 wide into La Source, and that was Saunders got by Blocker through the bus stop, but Blocker did not want to let him have any space there down the front straightaway, and that's allowed John Badefer also by Blocker, and the Adam Blocker gets checked up by a GT3 car. So that is all 3 Geodesic Racing drivers now by Adam Blocker, but that's put Blocker a lot closer to the front of this race. So it'll be interesting to see how the rest of his strategy plays out, because I guarantee you that next stint he's going to have the fresh tires that he didn't have this time. I will put this to you. Did Blocker maybe fight harder than he needed to, because he really got mugged by the traffic, unfortunately? We'll just check this all out. Blocker did have a bit of a technical blip once again in the moment through the chicane, but on the run out of it, it's Saunders that was at the front of the train. On the outside, Badeford. They were 3 wide and all overlapping for a moment there, and as they filtered their way off of the corner, just Blocker, I think, got a little bit checked up, and I tell you what, Badeford was not going to take no for an answer here. He knew that traffic was there and that Blocker would have to concede. And it's just one of those situations where Blocker was in a no-win situation. If he backed out too much, he would have lost all of his momentum anyway. So I think he was just hoping that the GT3 traffic would be a little bit more friendly than they were. But the GT3 traffic at the same time really had nowhere to go there. So just an unfortunate situation that got Blocker checked up, and he's now about 2 seconds behind
the geodesic racing duo of Betafor and Saunders in front of him.
Quick rundown of GT3 as well, but I mean at the front. Deja vu. Don't think we're going to see much different if Sean Campbell continues this rich vein of form that he seems to be striking no matter what car you throw him in. The WMP number 26 leads by 11 seconds, although Miguel Vigo, after his self-inflicted mistake, it must be said, and then I think getting bullied by a couple of LMDh cars, has got Josh Chin for company in what I think is going to be a very exciting battle for second and third. Now, not careful though, guess who's there to join the fun? That's Ryan Otis in that Synergy Motorsports number 95, while Carlos Villa winds his way out of turn number 1. Again, coming in a bit early, maybe burning up through the tires, but he's got Matthew Mohart trying to put some pressure on him. Eric Staropoli still trying to recover. He runs himself in the 7th position with Brian Bennett, Lano Callisto, and Andrew Marquez through the rest of your top 10. But Graham Saunders shedding the rear wing is stricken down the Kemmel Straight, and the Alpine Stars Hydro Race Geodesic Racing trio is now down to just 2.
That's just disastrous for Graham Saunders. That was a big moment coming down. I believe it was through Eau Rouge and Radion there. We'll have to get a replay of it, but
it's got to be with traffic.
Moment.
You don't lose a downforce car through that corner simply, and so we'll go straight to it. You can see 2 GT3 machines, that's Josh Chin and Miguel Vigo, isn't it? And so as Saunders comes to the, it's his teammate. My goodness me!
Got into the back of Graham Saunders and turned him. The closing rate was just too great, so Saunders gets checked up by Josh Chin through Radion, and then the 67 of John Betafor tried to shoot the gap there, got into his teammate, and just turned the number 100 of Graham Saunders. That is not good for either of those drivers, because if I'm being honest here, I think that should be a penalty for John Betafor as well.
I can see that maybe Saunders didn't leave that much room, but I tend to agree that Betafor could have, that Betafor didn't give Saunders that much room, but I think Saunders could have. I'm getting myself all sorts of twisted right now because I do not believe what I've just seen.
I know, I'm in the same boat. The thing for me with this incident, Arjuna, and the reason why I think it's a penalty is because Betafor is the one trying to pass both Chin and Saunders there. So because of that, Betafor has to do it responsibly. He tried to shoot the gap. The gap really wasn't there. I think he would have been much better served to back out, take the time loss. And because he was the one making contact with his teammate, I think he's got to get a penalty from race control here.
Yes, no, you said it right. Even though Saunders didn't give Betafor much room, the responsibility is on Betafor to get through safely, and so he shoots into a gap where he had a little bit more space on the side of Josh Chin, if we're being fair. He could have gone more to the right, but...
And Betafor has been black flagged by race control. There will be a penalty for John Betafor. So that is 2 geodesic racing drivers down in the same incident.
Jaden Munoz, also part of Geodesic, says a lot of netcode involved there, so maybe that is part of it. I will say that rule number 1 of racing is don't hit your teammate, isn't it?
It's rule number 1, and I would argue rule numbers 2, 3, and 4 as well, Arjuna.
I'm trying to think what Rule 6 would be if that's Rules 1 through 5.
Rule 6 is in order to finish first you must finish.
I thought it was going to be you're a racing driver, you must have excuses, but I like that one too. So, what this means is now Adam Blocker is promoted to 2nd. Phil Kraus and Flynn Lazier in their chase of the Powerslide Motorsports number 74 will get promoted to 3rd and 4th.
Yeah, so that strategy call from Adam Blocker now suddenly also just takes on another dimension here, Arjuna, because he has put himself in front of Kraus and Lazier, but Kraus and Lazier are quickly closing down because Blocker does have those older tires, so it'll be interesting to see just how much longer Blocker is going to hold on here. I think maybe 1 or 2 more laps at this point.
John Betafor cycling down pit lane, and you can feel just how frustrated he must be by how slow that car goes. But I mean, all things considered, he's only going to be about 5 seconds off the back of Lazier and Kraus. I wouldn't discount him from still being part of the equation. We're not far away from getting into the window where you could get to the end of the race by coming into pit lane as well. Now, Adam Blocker, Andrew, has already done the one stop where he's taken 2 tires. Surely he's going to be in for 4 tires this time by.
Yeah, he has to be. You can see that at this point in the stint, he's just tortured those tires, and they're on their last legs. He's going almost a second a lap slower at this point than Phil Kraus or Flynn Lazier around him. So he's going to need to take tires here. The question is just how long is he staying out? And again, I think probably a lap, maybe 2 at the most. But he's definitely going to be coming down sooner rather than later, getting on those fresh tires and trying to maximize this final stint.
So pit lane technically might actually open this lap by, because 18 times 2, let's say we're doing about 2-minute lap times. It's a bit longer than that. Let's just play it out though. 18 laps means 36 minutes or so. The problem becomes, Andrew, where is our race leader? He is coming through in towards Blanchimont. There's still the risk that this race could go an extra lap, and it could go 19 laps for Blocker. So surely he's got to go 1 lap longer than this and come in next time by.
Yeah, it's right on the edge, but I've got to say, Arjuna, I think that he's probably safe, given that we're averaging a little bit over a second a lap, or sorry, 2 minutes a lap. We're at that sort of 2-minute 3, 2-minute 4, so I think he's safe if he comes down this time by. That being said, it does look like he's going 1 more lap.
Well, there he will stay out for 1 more lap. Meanwhile, it's a 4-car slobber knocker for 10th position, I believe, or 11th, because Tyler Graf leads from Alex Guyon, Caleb Bensi, and Mike Rasmas. Now, of course, Bensi's already had the ire of the stewards directed towards him once today. You want to make sure he stays out of being a repeat offender. But 3 cars up in towards the chicane. Bensi looking feisty, and we know just how quick the race first car can be, no matter what car, no matter what track, and he's going to take to the inside of not just Guyon, but almost to Tyler Graf, who shuts the door for the time being and rolls his way back to the line in 11th.
Yeah, this has been a little bit of a ding-dong battle for a while here between these 3 drivers. Mike Rasmus has sort of been lurking in the background for a little while, but traffic has allowed him to close up as well, so really good battle for sort of the lower positions in the LMDh, but we've talked about this before, Arjuna. In a championship like this, every point counts, so these positions will matter come the end of the season.
Just look at the way the cars change direction as well. I mean, I know the BMW LMDh car maybe has not had the smoothest of rollouts. Does not mean it's not been a fun rollout, that's for sure. It's not really much fighting right now in terms of the top 5 in your GT3 class. Josh Chin dropping off the back of Miguel Vigo, albeit slightly. In the same vein, Flynn Lazier dropping off the back of Phil Kraus, but Kraus now has Adam Blocker directly in his sights.
Yeah, and I do think that I just heard Blocker on the radio saying that he's coming in this time by, so I believe it's the 74 this time by, and that will release the 91 of Phil Kraus. So I don't expect a move here. I think Kraus is just going to hold position, and we should see that blue car spear off to the right. Yes, we do.
And so from here, guaranteed that Blocker should be good in terms of fuel numbers. And so now, once again, it's the game of cat and mouse. It's Adam Blocker that scurries on off, gets fresh boots onto his car. Phil Kraus, Lazier, they continue to pound away, and they'll all cycle back into contention probably in the next 5 or 6 laps or so. Phil Kraus up the hill, looking nice and tidy. No major drama for him. Where's Blocker going to feed out, though? That becomes the new question.
Yeah, unlike the first round of pit stops where Blocker was sort of able to pick and choose where he was going to come out, this time he's very much at the mercy of whatever sort of happens here. He's not going to be able to pick the gap like he did before, so I think he's going to come out in just a little bit of traffic there. I think he's going to be fortunate, though. He just got out in front of a pack of GT3 cars, so he's got an LMDh in front of him. Who is that right now? I believe that's Chris Fowler, who's right in front of him, and that'll actually give Blocker a little bit of a draft. And with the fresh tires, I think this could actually be of benefit to Blocker to have that draft car of Fowler in front of him.
Also helps that he won't be the first onto the scene of traffic. It's very small thing, but it does play its little bit of a part. Now, Josh Chin, I think, has decided that he wants to try and do something different. And he comes into the pit lane for what should be his final scheduled stop of the day as well. Up on the jacks are going to take at least 2 tires as he drops with 24.7 seconds on the pit stop watch. Josh Chin should actually relatively get some clean air. There's Dean Mole, there's Dustin Wardlow coming down the pit straight, but all things considered, it's not a bad thing, like you say, to have some drafting help the first time down the Camel.
Yeah, although I think Josh is coming out in some relatively clean air here, and so I don't think he's going to get a lot of drafting help, but at the same time, I think that suits Chin just fine. He's at his best when he's sort of on his own, just vibing around a track, and having this clean air is really going to be of benefit to him. Oh, we have our leader down pit lane. That's Austin Young coming down pit lane this time by, and it looks like teammate John Betafor as well. So that's both of the remaining Geodesic Racing team drivers this time by. So that sort of locks them into this strategy as well, and we're going to see just how well Betafor is able to close up on fresh tires on the battle that was about 4 seconds in front of him with Kraus, Blocker, and Lazier.
So about 16 seconds stationary. I'm intrigued by this call because they haven't come in when the car would be empty.
Yeah, so again, 16 seconds stationary, that means that he's only taken on 2 tires on this pit stop, so he's come out well in front of Adam Blocker here.
No, but he came in to take 25 seconds, what was it, 11 laps ago? So
right.
He's come in with fuel left in that car rather than running it dry, which is something that in traditional endurance racing or racing philosophy in general is not something you traditionally do, especially if you've just taken 4 tires.
So what they're doing here, Arjuna, is basically they're timing this or whichever stop they're taking the 2 tires on. They're however many laps is needed to fill the tank for that much. There's a big incident in the LMDh class there, but they're basically catering their fuel load to how long it takes to change 2 tires is what they're doing.
So apparently tires are that important.
Well, it's the time stationary. So if you are only taking 2 tires but need 20 seconds of fuel, you're losing 4 seconds.
Yes, no, I get that. But apparently it's justifiable enough to come down and take tires, because otherwise I could see some other strategies being viable as well. We haven't looked at track conditions. Spa is known for having a decent load because of its just high-speed nature, which of course puts plenty of load on the tires. I can also see why they are shedding through what are likely Michelin tires. 47 degrees track temperature with absolutely no cloud cover to speak of, as Austin Young's going to get past Michael O'Brien, who has not come down to the pit lane, and get himself a little bit more clean air.
It's a little bit toasty out there as we push on to 2 p.m. sim time, and this is prime time where the temperatures are at their highest basically at this point in the day. It will start falling maybe just a little bit, maybe a degree or 2, but that won't affect the fall off of these tires too much. But yeah, it really is fascinating how all of these teams and drivers calculate exactly what the pit strategy is going to be, and it clearly is a viable pit strategy as both Betafor and Blocker have both used this 2-tire strategy through this race.
And the reason why that's significant is we're going to go to plenty of other tracks where I think that could be a viable idea as well. Silverstone could be one. A handful of others definitely to consider. I think the round that I'm most intrigued by is our trip over to the Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. Just given the speed difference between LMDh and the GT3s.
And 1 minute and change lap times for the LMDhs is going to be very, very interesting through there.
Yeah, I think that's the one that's going to be the most chaotic.
Our leader just almost had a moment. Sorry, Arjuna. Our leader had a moment coming out of the back half of the course there and nearly hit a GT3 car. Or sorry, it was Austin Young. Sorry, not Phil Kress. is leading now, but Austin Young, who will be the net race leader when this all comes out, that was who had the big moment there.
We'll go back and find a replay. But as Flynn Lazier comes down to pit lane, where is he going to cycle out in comparison to Adam Blocker? Well, Blocker is just coming into the chicane. Lazier's already been stationary for about 13 seconds, so he's about ready to drop and roll. Blocker's going to have to get the move on, and don't forget that you shortcut a decent amount of that inside of La Source, but Lazier's been stationary for 23 seconds and
I
now
think he
drops.
took 4 tires. I think he took 4 tires again, so he was not comfortable with that 2-tire strategy. I think he felt that with the way he was driving, the fall off was just a little bit too much. You saw that Blocker, he basically ended up in the same battle that he was with Kraus and Lazier before he started the pit strategy. He just came out a little bit in front of them. So I think that Lazier, in weighing it all out, he just felt like he wouldn't be able to sustain the pace on those 2 tires.
And so now we'll get to see how Phil Kraus thinks about things in a few moments' time. Let's go ahead and, well, now, I want to cycle back a little bit further and just ride with Austin Young and see what he saw in towards Stavilo. So he's got Michael O'Brien on his rear bumper. He expects the GT3 to stay to the left, hold your racing line. Austin Young, justifiably, I think, is going to be a little bit concerned.
Yeah, that was, we were talking about that earlier in that earlier incident where the GT3 and the LMDh got crossed up because they both sort of stayed on their lines. In that case, the GT3 car definitely needed to stay on his line. Did Phil Kraus just clip the barrier as he came into pit lane there?
I was wondering if he was mighty close, but I did think he judged that about as perfect as you can get. We'll find out if he's going to be stationary on pit lane for longer than expected, but the car looks all right. So, Blocker is still winding up towards Blanchimont. I mean, if Phil Kraus takes a 15-second stop, we know it's not really in contention what's going to happen here. There's plenty of smoke coming out the back, though.
Yeah, that's a lot of smoke. That could be an engine for Phil Kraus.
He's not dropped and gone. Well, now he's dropped and away. 22.7 seconds on board with Blocker as he fires his way up into La Source. Kraus is going to hold on, but question
just
will
barely.
Be, how much does Betafer have? Because it's more Betafer that I think Kraus is going to be concerned with, right on the rear bumper.
Well, but keep in mind that Betafor is on those 2 tires, so I don't think that he's going to have the pace once Phil Kraus gets up to speed. So Betafor needs to find a way around Phil Kraus right now and hope to hold him up just a little bit. But once Kraus gets his tires up to temperature, I don't think Betafor has a way around him.
So how much pressure is there now as Jimbo Pfeiffer finds his way to pit lane as well? Chase Wilson, who I believe is still leading in your AM class, has just left pit lane. He is 11th, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing, Andrew, that we haven't had much to talk about when it comes to Chase Wilson today.
It's been a really quiet race for him, and he's just sort of been on his own throughout most of the race. Hasn't been really in too many battles with pro or AM class drivers, so he's, I think, just sort of vibing around the track right now and just enjoying life at Spa.
I mean, a stint in a race car at Spa is like being at a spa day, I guess. I wonder if you could sell that to a partner. Let's go for a spa day at Spa. Sean Campbell doesn't need a spa day, though, because he must be pretty cool, calm, and collected with those cucumbers on his eyes behind the wheel of his number 26.
Yeah, speaking of just vibing around a track, it's been another sort of walk in the park on this Wednesday evening for Sean Campbell. He has been just absolutely destroying the field. Although I will say that Vigo and Otis and Chin have been keeping it a lot closer than they were last week at Sebring.
So Josh Chin, of course, pitted a handful of laps ago as Ryan Otis dives down onto pit lane and goes up on the jacks as well. Where is the Floridian, Joshua Chin, in the 73? I'm going to say it just feels wrong to say Josh Chin's not in the number 93. But he's out of the final corner in his private label Team Hype car. He was very disappointed I did not get the reference to his livery, by the way. He's not in traditional Josh Chin purple because this is a tribute to other famous BMWs that have raced in the past, and I think there's some association with the private label team as well. We'll get to that in the future, because Josh Chin's more concerned about the fact that he's going to have to find a way past Ryan Otis now.
Yeah, Ryan Otis had a tremendous second half of that stint, and I think they're, just as we were talking about some fuel sort of things going on and strategy games going on in LMDh, there's also a strategy game to be played here in this GT3 field, and I think Otis has worked it to perfection. He went long on that first stint, Chin went short, and it's caused Chin to have sort of a slower opening part of this second stint. The question is, how fast will Otis be able to fire up these tires, because Chin has been out here for a number of laps. He's got fresh tires, and I think he's going to be quickly looking for a way around Ryan Otis here.
We'll keep our eyes on that, but quick look back at our replay machine, as that's David Sirois trying to get down the inside of lap traffic and slightly misjudging it, but fortunately with no significant consequences to anybody else. Meanwhile, Chris Reagan, who had been having a pretty decent run all things considered, still has a chance for a decent finish in the AM class. He's going to roll out, likely just inside of the top 20 overall in class.
It's been a decent day for Chris Staples, and I definitely think that he can still salvage a really good finish out of this. And it's always fascinating when you have these pro and AM classes, Arjuna, to see sort of the battles within the battles, and you sort of question, if you're an AM driver, who are you really fighting with sometimes. So you see there's a driver right behind Staples right now, so you almost have to wonder. And you have to be so heads up on the relative screen to know who you really have to do a lot of fighting with, and who is sort of the people that you can take a little bit more room with it and maybe give them a little bit more leeway. But here it's another AM driver right behind him, so they are definitely fighting for position here.
Lionel Kalisto is going to enter pit lane as well. So Josh Chin and Ryan Otis now scored 5th and 6th, still waiting for 3 yet to come down onto pit lane. So this is a throwback to PTG racing. Josh Chin wants me to know. He wants me to know, to be clear. He doesn't want you to know, he wants me to know. He called me uncultured racing heathen, which I have no defense. But the tie back to the private label team hype that I was getting to, Andrew, is the fact that PTG is the team that Tommy Milner's father ran for a bit back in the day.
That is something I wasn't aware of, actually, Arjuna. So
see, you're uncultured racing heathen as well.
I'm also an uncultured racing heathen, apparently, at least when it comes to GT racing.
I'm just saying, the next time Josh Chin crashes on pit lane, he knows what he's in for.
Yep.
Let's take a look at what happened to another one of our GT3 drivers. This is Dean Moll, who interestingly lost the rear end quite early there.
It was early, but it was also sort of one of those slow, lazy spins. So that tells me that it was probably just carrying too much speed into the corner, rather than one of the sort of under-braking incidents that we've seen with the GT3s so far. Meanwhile, Phil Krause, he goes around for another lap, and he is just lap after lap stretching it away from John Betefort. Meanwhile, Betefort is slowly falling back into the clutches of Flynn Lazier, who is also out in front of Adam Blocker here. I believe that has recently changed, hasn't it, Arjuna?
I think, yeah, Blocker has been passed by Lazier recently, but as we jump on board with the power slide number 74 and dive our way down the hill, I think we're going to see Lazier getting past Betefort pretty quickly. You mentioned it, we have just gotten past about 2 p.m. virtual standard time, and traditionally here on iRacing, about 1:30, 2 p.m. is about the hottest that the track conditions will ever get, and so these LMDhs as well as these GT3 machines have very much taken some big hits to the tire life over the course of the day. Miguel Vigo drops and rolls. He's going to likely, I would think, hold on, but where's Ryan Otis? Where's Josh Chin in the equation? Oh, nowhere to be seen. Still 6 and a bit seconds further back.
Yeah, it was a really quick stop there for Vigo, and it's allowed him to come out. I think it's really that Josh Chin, the reason he's dropped back so far is he had to make, I believe it was 4 or 5 laps more on this final stint. That means he, A, had to have on the stop, B also had higher fuel for those opening laps of his stint, so that means that his tires have just worn out that much more, and he's just not able to really do anything about Ryan Otis at this point.
Maybe traffic will play its part. You'd think that's the likeliest situation that would see things swap around. Baedefer going to be firmly looking in the rearview mirror now, though, as Flynn Lazier has hooked on to the draft, and as they climb up in towards Blanchimont, already that overspeed from that Penguin RC car, but nowhere to send the momentum, and as a slow car of Chris Staples rolls around the track, opportunity for Lazier to go the long way around. It switches back to the inside. Baedefer struggling for rear end grip, you can tell, as they squirm off the corner. Lazier is going to try and block his way past the traffic, and now up to what will be net third spot.
It's not over yet though. Baedefer going down the outside of the source. That's never going to work. He slots in back now behind Lazier, and that was a really strong move from Lazier through that bus stop chicane there. And it's also allowed Adam Blocker to get that little bit closer, but Blocker's going to catch some traffic through Eau Rouge and Radion, and that's going to put him back further again. So Baedefer fighting back on Lazier down the Kemmel Straight here, and it's not done yet, Arjuna.
I think Blocker needs Lazier to be held up here, because he's starting to lose track as well. Through traffic. They thought about 3 wide. Baedefer thought better of it as they now funnel through Malmedy and shoving the BMW colored car out of the way. And now Baedefer struggling to hold ground. What happened to Chris Staples, you're wondering? Well, this is what happened to Chris Staples. You can crash even before Blanchimont, it turns out. Staples maybe a bit high and half a lane up higher than where Jimbo Pfeiffer was expecting him. And well, Chris Staples takes the big old smack into the wall.
Yeah, another big impact for a GT3 driver, and like I gotta say, when you're going down that straightaway, you're very much expecting the drivers to stay sort of half and half on one side, and I think it was a combination of Staples coming a little bit too close to that center line, and at the same time Pfeiffer maybe cutting it a little bit too much. Oh, Van de Sant with a big incident, and who was that?
Callisto.
In the GT3. It was Callisto.
Trevor Malone, excuse me, that I do believe got the punt as a result. We'll just ride on board. It was the 69 and just a bit of gravel on the right sides, and from there Van de Sant was a passenger into Malone. And
we saw that with a GT3 driver earlier on in the race. Did almost the exact same thing, getting up on that curb on the exit of Lake Holm there, and it just is apparently really, really slippery out there, except for instead Van de Sant going head on into the wall, he went into that GT3 driver instead.
Last 15 odd minutes to go in this one. The Gomez Sim Industries Grand Prix of Spa presented by Next Level Racing. We're on board with Adam Blocker, Valiokas Taylor back down onto pit lane to finish up the pit stop cycle for us here today. It's now just Blocker trying to get past Baedefer, trying to then latch onto the back of Lazier and fight for a podium spot potentially. As they climb up the hill in towards Lecombe, more focused on the traffic in front of them. That's Dustin Wardlow, the Candy Man, that Baedefer is going to try and get past. Blocker has to follow for the time being, but it's in towards Bruxelles where maybe there'll be a chance.
Yeah, Blocker definitely has the fresher tires here, and that's going to make a pass all but inevitable with 15 minutes left. The question is, will he be able to get around Baedefer before Flynn Lazier gets too far down into the distance here? They're already about 2 seconds back behind Lazier, and Blocker can't afford to let that gap get much greater if he wants to find a way around the number 4 driver.
It is corner by corner at this point that the ground is being lost. Not the only cars fighting those around the outside. Michael O'Brien down through No Name Corner passes one of our BMW GT3 machines. He's trying to chase down another Graphics LC entry in Matt Taylor. Still a long way to go as Tyler Groff around at Lecombe.
There was some real drama at Lecombe in the last couple of minutes, or last couple of seconds, and it was I believe it was Bensi and Graf, and Graf just gets in a little bit too deep, and then he hits that access road, and Bensi actually gets a little bit of damage, I think, as Graf goes by. Hopefully Bensi will won't have any suspension damage, but it was a big mistake there from Graf. Again, just too deep, goes on straight, and then when he hits that access road, the car just rotates around on him.
I mean, if there wasn't contact, Caleb Benzie should go buy a lottery number.
Absolutely. I'm fairly certain he got a little bit of contact, though, but it looks more superficial than maybe it should have been there.
So, Vederver and Blocker still tussling for 4th position, I think, at this point. Blocker is out of striking distance, and Austin Young continues to hold a 6+ second advantage at the front of the LMDh field. Back with GT3, Sean Campbell still does lead by 20 seconds, but Miguel Vico actually has a bit of a buffer to Ryan Otis and Joshua Chin. The king of chins has brought the gap down to around 1 second or so, but Ryan Otis continues to frustrate.
Ryan Otis has really been weathering the storm from Josh Chin for the last 10 or so laps here, ever since the pit cycle ended. Otis has been doing a really good job keeping the gap in that sort of 1 to 1.5 second range. Sometimes it goes up a little bit, sometimes it goes down, but he's doing just enough to keep Josh Chin at bay. And this is what we've seen time and time again from Ryan Otis in the Lionheart Retro Series, is when he's in a position like this, he's very, very difficult to track down because he simply doesn't make very many mistakes.
Onto the brakes, into that chicane they go. Nice and tidy for the time being. I tell you what, with this focus that we can have on Ryan Otis right now, it seems like a pretty fitting time to head on over to our BMW Performance Driving School driver profile, and we take a look at the 2021 Lionheart Retro Series King. And his Retro Series stats was part of their very first race in that Lotus 79 back at Homestead, Miami, but grabbed his first win on the road courses, the first of 9. He's got more pole positions than that 13 in the 61 starts, and apparently has as many top 10s as he has top 5s, Andrew, which means when he finishes well, I guess.
It absolutely does. Ryan Otis is one of the most respected and venerable members of the Lionheart community here, and he is one of those drivers where he is not only strong but consistent as well. As you see there are only 12 races out of 61 where he didn't finish in the top 5. That is just incredible. He has so much speed, but he also has so much consistency as well. And it's such a potent combination. It's why he was the 2021 champion.
Helps when you can qualify decently as well, Andrew. I don't mean to dig the knife into your back or anything, but you know,
I just take the path less traveled to the result.
Sure. That's again rule number 6 of racing drivers. Have your excuses ready.
That's 7. 6 is the first. In order to finish first you must finish.
Okay, gotcha. We just got to make sure the ordering is right. That's the important thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, Josh Chin, wake up! Austin Young's coming through.
Oh, and Chin loses it. Oh no!
And contacts with. Oh, I think that was the Sim Race 24/7 Academy car of Eliza Indranini, and Josh Chin goes from hero to 0.
Yeah, that all changed in about 3 seconds there for Josh Chin. He got, I think, a little bit surprised by the Geodesic Racing driver of Young coming through there, and it's resulted in some significant damage, although it looks like Chin may just be able to continue on here, but
no meatball.
Yeah, no meatball, so that's a good thing, but that was a heavy hit, and it'll definitely put paid to any effort Chin had of potentially getting a podium in the GT3 class today.
So first on board with Chin, and well, that's a loose moment, and there's not much you can do when you're following that closely.
Yeah, and I think it was just a little bit of dirty air as well. Like he got into the corner and he was carrying probably a little bit more speed than he was hoping for, and just as he was crossing over the wake there, you really saw the car get unsettled and just come around on him. It's such a helpless feeling, but here is Blocker and Betafur going at it, and it looks like Blocker might just have the upper hand on Betafur this time through Eau Rouge as they come around Chin.
Crucially, Josh Chin was in the right place at the right time for Adam Blocker. The two drivers have tussled before in the Dallara IR18, no such qualms this time. Blocker, though, has to defend. Betafor with the draft, and painting the white line as Blocker gives a shove to Betafor to force him to allow a little bit more room on entry for the Powerslide Motorsports car, and it took several laps, but Adam Blocker finally has 4th position and is now 4 and a bit odd seconds off the back of Flynn Lazier for that final step of the podium.
A very important move there for Adam Blocker to get around Betafor, but I do think that at this point it's probably a little bit too late for a potential podium for Blocker, unless there's a mistake that happens. And we've seen a number of mistakes happen throughout the course of this race, so I'm not ruling anything out, but I think Blocker has basically just got to be hoping that one of the 3 drivers in front of him makes a big mistake if he wants to stand on the podium here today.
Remind me of when you get what the incident limit for this race is, Andrew. Do you know off the top of your head?
I'm not positive off the top of my head. Give me one second.
No, I'm just curious because Spa's notorious for its track limits, and I just wonder as we get closer to those final 5 minutes if anyone's closer to that limit than they'd want to be.
So the penalties in sim start coming in at 28x.
Okay, so maybe we're not far from that. Betafor back past Blocker. I think that's maybe just using the hybrid a little bit more efficiently on that run up in towards Blanchimont. Oh, but now a bit deep is the Hydra Race Geodesic Racing car, and Blocker with the switchback is going to cut back as they work closer and closer up towards Miguel Vigo. Contact between the two of them once again as Blocker tries to force Betafor to give him some more space. They'll be side by side, but now 2 kilometers flat out from La Source up to the Lacombe chicane. It's Betafor in front for the moment, but still side by side as Blocker concedes into Eau Rouge.
Yeah, I think that was a little bit of a teammate trying to help teammate there with Vigo playing a little bit of a blocker on Adam Blocker. But Blocker was having none of it, and he forced his way down there into La Source. Now he's trying the outside here into Lacombe, Arjuna.
So dangerous, we've mentioned it before, but Betafor able to chop the nose off. Still 6 or so minutes to go. It should mean, with Austin Young winding through Pouhon right now, that he'll come to the line and take what should be 3 laps to go next time by. These drivers have 3.5 laps still left to play if they really want to do so. We'll check in with Josh Chin just momentarily here because no meatball for him. He's been able to stay on track. Last lap did a 2:20.631. What did Carlos Villa do trying to chase him down? A 2:20.085. What did Matthew Morhart do trying to chase him down? A 2:19.697.
Yeah, so Chin definitely has his handful with this car. This car is not going straight right now at all. But at the same time, he's giving it everything he possibly can. But you can tell that he's just not quite, doesn't quite have the confidence in the car to do exactly what he wants. But he's doing everything he can to stay in front of that 46 of Carlos Villa behind.
Seems to be a little bit right-hand down in terms of steering as well. Not sure if there's a story about that. Morhart is closed up to Carlos Villa. He may be Josh Chin's best friend. Outside for Blocker into the chicane, though, at the end of the lap, as still they tussle for 4th spot. He's inside of Betafor and bodies the Hydra Race Geodesic Racing car through the final corner at the line. Blocker in front once more, but for how much longer?
Yeah, that was a power move there from Adam Blocker, and he needed to make a move like that on Betafor. Did a really good job through the bus stop. His last of the late breakers, and I'm not sure how he was able to keep it that far in there, but he really just powered him through. Meanwhile, the battle for the GT3 class is still on. This is 5th place with Villa and Morhart right behind him.
Can see that snaking back and forth, Blocker and Betafor. I'm not really sure that's the quickest way to get around the track, but I think at this point 7 seconds back, Blocker's got no chance of getting past Flynn Lazier. He was really the only one of the major contenders to gamble on the early shorter pit stop. I think overall you could say it's worked for him, +4 relative to his qualifying position. But he could have been in contention for a podium, all things considered.
Yeah, I think if he had gotten a little bit luckier with the traffic, Blocker strategy could have worked out more. But one thing I do want to say is Look at the sixth place in the LMDh class. Marius Valiokis, he's really just starting to slowly reel back in Adam Blocker and John Betafort, and it's been a recovery drive for Valiokis. Of course, he had that incident right at the beginning of the race, and he's been recovering ever since. But if they keep fighting, if Blocker and Betafort keep fighting, keep losing 2 or 3 seconds a lap, very quickly Valiokis could be part of that battle on the last lap of this race.
Where is your race leader? Just came across the line with about 3 minutes to go. So 2 laps left for the majority of the field. And we'll just keep an eye on that where we can. As we now check in with Phil Krause, who loses some time behind some lap cars, but all things considered, Phil Krause, another one that may be struggling to get to grips with this BMW M Hybrid V8, but going to get a great result out of it. Second spot, at least still, with some time left on the clock.
As long as he doesn't have any more BMWs cutting into his racing line as he's trying to negotiate them. That was a little bit of a close moment there coming out of La Source for Phil Krause, but yeah, it's been a really solid race from Krause, and I do think that it's taken him a little bit of time to really get used to the LMDHs, but he's really starting to pick this up, and that's going to be a scary thing for all the other competitors. As we saw last year in the Open Wheel Series, when Phil Krause really understands a car and starts to like the setups, he is nigh on unstoppable. So the fact that he is this close to Austin Young, who is no slouch in a car like this, it bodes well for him for the rest of the season.
As the battle for 5th and 6th comes across the line, I get the sneaky suspicion that Josh Chin might be able to stymie the damage and hold on to 4th. Coming down the hill with 2 laps still to go for him. It's stabilized in terms of margin to Carlos Villa. And so Matthew Morhart at Synergy Motorsport 62 will be focused on one thing and one thing only. Meanwhile, 7 kilometers or so away from back-to-back victories for Austin Young in the Hydra Race Geodesic Racing number 11. He didn't put it on pole this time but he's bided his time, and once again, when the time of asking came, Austin Young rose to the occasion. 1 lap left to go at Spa-Francorchamps.
Been such an impressive race from Young, where his teammates made small mistakes and small errors that really cost them. Even before that they had that coming together, Austin Young really sort of elevated himself on that second stint and put a good amount of distance between himself and his teammates, and that's often what it takes in a race like this, where you have the fixed setup, you have everyone driving the same way. You have to be able to find the opportunity and seize it, and that's exactly what Austin Young has done today.
Got to figure out the traffic patterns as well, and I think now with 2 rounds into the books, and it's 2 tracks that plenty of drivers will have experience on through iRacing official races and special events. From here, the journey starts to get a little bit more unknown. Yes, Hockenheim is then followed by Watkins Glen, but it's a trip over to the Circuit of the Americas, Fuji, Mosport. We've got Red Bull Ring, Indianapolis thrown in there. Plenty of tracks, Andrew, where there's going to be so much unknown, and drivers are relying on their knowledge and trust in other drivers when they're thinking about what they want to be doing.
Yes, and I would argue that, Arjuna, that trust may be in a little bit short supply after this race. We've seen a number of borderline and questionable incidents. Race control has had to be fairly active today compared to Sebring, so I'd say that there's going to be a lot of practicing in order before Hockenheim comes in for a number of these drivers, just to get that comfort level that you're talking about.
So you know how at Hockenheim you've got Go Bowling, right? So you can make the Go Bowling puns. We need a pun for when we go to the hairpin of the Hockenheim ring, because you know what's about to happen, don't you?
Oh, I know exactly what's about to happen.
But that's a problem for the month of May. It's been a delightful start to the Butt Kicker Sportscar Series, though, with back-to-back rounds here to kick off April. And for Austin Young, it's double delight after dominating proceedings at the Sebring International Raceway. Austin Young brings the Hydra Race Geodesic Racing Team back to victory lane in the Butt Kicker Sportscar Series by conquering the Ardennes and winning the Gomez Sim Industries Grand Prix of Spa, presented by Next Level Racing. Phil Kraus, Flynn Lazier, that's the rest of your podium, with Adam Blocker, John Badefer, and Marius Valiokis rounding out your top 6 in your LMDh. It's an equally dominant display though for Sean Campbell. Yes, the margin may not be 30 seconds, 22 seconds are still pretty good.
It absolutely is. It's been a wonderful drive from Campbell. Again, he did exactly what he needed to do. He was patient in that first stint when Vigo was maybe pressuring him for a little bit, quickly dropped him, and then it just became an easy lap after lap race for Sean Campbell. He's done exactly what he needed to do every single corner of this race.
We did miss it, but Chase Wilson has already crossed the line and I believe taken the victory in the AM class once again. So congratulations in order for Twisted Motorsports number 13. Sean Campbell will be delighted with how things are playing out. It's going to be hard to rip away a BMW M4 GT4 experience at the BMW Performance Driving School from the WMP Racing number 26. But the likes of Miguel Vigo are going to try. After what was a tumultuous round number 1, Vigo stands back up, and even after being knocked down once again, Andrew, he's back on the podium where we'd expect him to be.
Yeah, and Ryan Otis comes across in 3rd position, and just one more solid drive from Otis, again with a top 5, and Josh Chin coming across the line in 4th does manage to limp that car home in front of Carlos Vila.
I mean, he got absolutely clobbered. That right side looks pretty good, all things considered.
Does, although I do see a little bit of scuff marks on there.
Just a few. You're not selling that one as factory fresh, that's for sure. Just a handful more cars that will wait to come across the line before we head into our post-race coverage, show you some unofficial race results, and then talk to some drivers as well, because that's always the fun part. After 90 hard minutes of racing, the opportunity to break down what the drivers all saw from their perspective around what's been a crazy second round of the championship. All the drivers come across the line, and so it's time to run you down through your unofficial butt kicker race result, because who knows what else Race Control still has yet to run their eye through. Austin Young back to back though, and remember, he's running by himself in the team championship. Watch out for that. He may be making a claim for that all by himself. Phil Kraus for the private label Team Hype will come across the line in 2nd, with Flynn Lazier booking the final podium on the day. Adam Blocker able to use an alternate strategy to get up in front of a couple more of the Hydro Race Geodesic Racing teammates, while John Badefer slips back to 5th after starting on pole position. It's Marius Valiokis, who started on the outside of the front row, that drops back to 6th, while Matt Taylor leads the contingent of Graphics LC, with Michael O'Brien, Aaron Morgan, and Chris Fowler all through the top 10. It's Caleb Bensi then in that Team Race First car that did get involved in a couple of moments, but still finishes in front of David Sirwa and Tyler Graft, all classified on the leading lap. One lap down, it's Mike Rasmus in the Graphics LC voiture number 68, with Synergy Lavoie's Alex Gouillon 2 laps down. Alex Van der Sant, the first of the retirees for Powerslide Motorsports, in his number 96, while Graham Saunders, unfortunately involved with his teammate John Badefer, coming up over the crest of Radion. That saw him drop down. Barrett Rolfe and Brian Beard, also early retirements for them. That's the entirety of the 19 LMDh cars. Over in GT3, it was Sean Campbell. Domination stations once again, and 24 seconds clear. This time with Miguel Vigo, though, who was able to hold on to a 2nd place finish. It's Ryan Otis that grabs another podium in the Synergy Motorsports number 95. He'll be one to watch, that's for sure. While Josh Chin, with late race damage, still holds on to 4th in front of Carlos Villa and Eric Staropoli, with Brian Bennett and Lionel Callisto also jumping up in front of Matthew Mordhart. Not sure what happened there to the number 62 on the final lap of the race, but he squeaks in front of Andrew Marquez. Chase Wilson, the best of the AMs, in 11th, with Dustin Wardlow, Dean Moll, and Jimbo Pfeiffer on debut down in 14th spot. Jim Herrick, Chris Reagan, 2nd and 3rd in AM, and in front of James Paulson, while Logan Spath is in 18th. Creighton Carter and Eliza Indraini through your top 20. It's Clint Martin, Chris Staples, and then Trevor Malone, along with Craig Forsyth, all classified technically, I guess, as finishers, with Luis Gonzalez Nunez, Brian Greenlee, and Nate Siefker, with Drew White, all through the 28 cars that took to the green flag about 90 odd minutes ago. And so with that, it leads us into our butt kicker post-race show, and standing by in HyperX victory lane for the second consecutive week, it's Austin Young. So let's dial up the Hydra Race geodesic racing driver and ask Austin, you didn't have to start from the front again, and this time it looked like strategy played its part out as well. How is it coming out on top once again in this butt kicker sports car series from your perspective?
This one is definitely much more of a surprise. Not as much confidence as we throughout practice, but was able to at least qualify close enough to the front to give myself a shot. And then looks like some stuff happened behind me. I haven't had a chance to look, but yeah, definitely very, very, very ecstatic to be where I'm at.
A lot of the time when we talk about Hydra Race geodesic racing, and if it was a 1-2-3, we'd be saying, oh, you guys built a great setup. What's it like coming into an event like this when you can run 1-2-3 and be separated by half a second between the three of you, but it's all in the driving? How are you working together to figure things out?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a team effort this week to make sure that we're all dialed in. Luckily, we were pretty even from the start, so didn't have no one had to really figure it out. But yeah, we'll look at telemetry and go through all of that. But then a lot of the stuff is decided by the driver and the preference that we each have. So it's both ways, both teamwork and kind of some individual.
One more question, of course, Sebring and Spa to start things off. These are roads widely traveled, if you will. Next we go to the Hockenheim ring, which is probably a little bit less traveled. How do you think we're going to fare there, especially knowing we've got this great awful hairpin that is known for a bit of chaos?
Yeah, lap one, I don't know where I want to be into the hairpin, but I like Hockenheim. I wish we could go there more in iRacing. Looking forward to it.
That's the first. Someone saying they like new Hockenheim. Old Hockenheim is much superior, but Austin Young, congratulations on a second consecutive victory, and we'll see you in May to see if it all rolls on.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
So Austin Young joins us in HyperX victory lane, as does Sean Campbell, this time in your GT3 class, in the GT3 Pro specifically. Sean, what was it, half a second or so in qualifying, and then started to slowly build an advantage, but for a while, Miguel did keep you quite honest.
Yeah, at the start we had a little bit of a, not like a scrap, but a back and forth in terms of pace and whatnot, but I started focusing on trying to be as smooth as possible, which ended up saving the tires enough to where I didn't have to take them for the end, I think.
Oh, interesting. So this is one of the things that we've been talking about, strategy and how it all changes. So you take no tires. I do have to ask, at a track like this, how were the tires feeling at the end? Because you still did a 2:19.957, fastest of all the drivers on your final laps.
Well, the balance was a little weird because the right front was wearing a lot and the left rear was wearing a lot, so that when you turned left it would understeer, but when you turned right it would oversteer. And on one of the laps I got a big snap of oversteer into the braking zone at Fagnes.
Okay, interesting. Now, we've got to try and figure out some sort of bop here, Sean, to try and bring everyone else into contention. I'm suggesting we'll tie one hand behind your back for the next race. What do you think?
Well, this is a BMW series, so driving the Porsche wouldn't work. But
No.
BMW Z4, how about that? That's on the old tire model, it'll be slower.
Maybe we could put you in the GT4, you know?
Oh, I love that car.
Oh, see, the thing is, you'd find a way to win in that car as well. We'll let you go and celebrate a second consecutive win, Sean. And next up, it's the Hockenheim ring. Can't wait to see you in May.
Yeah, you too.
Sean Campbell joins us for the second consecutive time a winner. But let's chat with Miguel Vigo, who was at least able to see the checkered flag this time, even if it wasn't without some thrills and spills once again, Miguel.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I had that one off. What's it in that one corner? I forgot what it's called.
Puhan.
I guess, yeah, Puhan. I must have hit the grass or something, and I thought it was almost over. I was already gonna get pissed off and just kind of throw my gloves to the ground, but luckily I was able to save it and continue on.
First, when we first saw it, we kind of jumped to it as you were spinning, and so it was like, oh, traffic got into you. You say grass. When we look to the replay, we don't think you touched any grass. Is that curb on the outside being raised a little bit unsettling in this GT3 setup?
I would assume so. I mean, to be honest, this is the first time it happened. I didn't have it at all in practice, but I've heard there's some issues with the curbs and the tires where it just, completely the physics kind of go off, and the car's just instant spin. So I'm kind of guessing that's what happened, but I haven't seen the incident yet. I thought maybe it was like you said, it was I got hit or something like that. But I don't know. We'll see.
Well, at the very least, you got momentum back on your side. What do you need to take it to Sean, though? Because we were just talking about that with him. I said we should tie one of his hands behind his back.
Yeah, I mean, he needs more weight, but, he is pretty young after all. I'm turning 40 this year, so that's going to be extremely hard to, catch up to someone who's going to have, a lot more time to practice and put in for something like this, where, I only had maybe like 20 minutes this whole week to kind of lay some laps down. So, but that's how the game is played, and hats off to him. It's really his championship to lose, as I told him. But maybe he'll have some fun in a couple rounds or something like that, and he'll get bored of being out in the distance, winning by 20 plus seconds or whatever it is.
Lost the first challenge. I got it. Congratulations, Miguel, on the podium, and we'll see you in May to roll on to the Hockenheim ring.
Yep, sounds good, boys. Thanks for the broadcast, and I'll see you guys next time.
Miguel Vigo jumping in to round out our post-race interviews. And Andrew, always great to chat with the drivers and get their opinions. But like I mentioned, over to Germany next up, and we go to a track where, like I mentioned, we made it worse in the last 22 odd years.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that we don't have the old Hockenheim ring where they're going off through the forest that they used to, but I will echo some of the sentiments that we heard. I don't mind the new Hockenheim ring quite. The problem is that you compare it to the old Hockenheim ring, and of course it's worse because the old Hockenheim ring was the best. But as far as tracks go, it's not the worst track that we go to. No,
it's not. It does have this certain other Porsche Experience Center, though, so maybe we can't like it because there's no BMW Center there. That's of course what's up next, but I think it's really interesting how, again, we're going back to start off the month of May. Then of course plenty of us turn our attention over to Speedway Indiana for the second half of that month, at least in the real world. Back over stateside in the Lone Star State, then over to France, Japan. We're going all over the shop. It gets to the point of the season, though, Andrew, where, again, like we've been saying a number of times, a couple of tracks where a lot of the drivers have less experience, and crucially, less multi-class experience as well.
Absolutely, and it's good that we have this break here before Hockenheim for the drivers to really put in some practice laps, get some experience in the traffic, and really start to get comfortable. And I think that as the season wears on, when we get to the likes of Fuji or Mosport, you're going to see a lot more comfort with these drivers. But still at Hockenheim, in just a couple of weeks' time, it's going to be a tall order to have that comfort level established.
Oh, what a opening start to the season it has been for this Butt Kicker Sports Car Series. 2 rounds done and still 16 to go. We can't wait to see how it all shakes up for the rest of the year. However, before we say goodbye, it's time to thank those that make this all possible. Starting with HyperX. The Lionheart Racing Series is powered by HyperX, makers of premier gaming gear like the legendary ultra-comfortable Cloud line of gaming headsets. Whatever you play, however you play, HyperX knows. We're all gamers. For more information on HyperX products, visit hyperx.com. You're passionate about sim racing, but it always feels a little flat compared to the feeling of driving a real car. Now you can actually feel what it's like to drive a race car. Butt Kicker haptic hardware and software are easy to install and let you feel every bump in the track, slip of your tire, and engine redline. The tactile feedback is so accurate and realistic, you'll be driving faster and having more fun than ever before. Visit thebuttkicker.com. If you think sim racing is thrilling, try getting behind the wheel of a real race car. The BMW M4 GT4 experience at the BMW Performance Driving School in Thermal, California puts you in the cockpit of one of BMW's fastest cars, complete with roll cage and racing slicks. You'll get fitted with a driving suit, practice pit stops, and lap their track with pro instructors. Nothing virtual about their thrills. To book your M4 GT4 experience, call or visit the links on screen. Next Level Racing is an industry-leading cockpit and motion simulator manufacturer devoted to creating the most immersive experience possible for the global sim racing community. Take your racing to the next level and visit nextlevelracing.com. Gomez Sim Industries are makers of high-end esports equipment and control. Precision built using nothing but the best materials available today. Passion and handmade craftsmanship drive each made-to-order build, creating a driving experience like no other. Visit GomezSimIndustries.com. Arena is an all-new esports streaming experience driven by real-time interactions between gamers and their communities. Arena brings live broadcast fan engagement to the next level. Get involved and make a difference on arena.tv. From simple logos to full branding for your company, Virtual Designs delivers race by Indy 500 champions. Graphics offers the finest quality with a wide range of design services. Visit graphicsesports.com. And it's not just them, but so many more that make it all possible. To learn more about the Lionheart Racing Series, its partners, and the 3 competitions its sanctioning body puts on, head over to Lionheart Racing Series to learn a little bit more. And of course, don't forget, social media is your home for all the latest news in the world of the Lionheart Racing Series. We're off for the next couple of weeks, but we'll return when we descend on the Hockenheim ring to start off the month of May. 2 exciting rounds to kick off the Butt Kicker Sports Car Championship, and the Gomez Sim Industries Grand Prix of Spa presented by Next Level Racing did not disappoint. 3 repeat winners. Is that going to be the story of the championship? If it is, it's going to be a dominant year, but there's plenty of surprises still left to come. On behalf of the team at RaceSpotTV, for Andrew Kinsella alongside myself, Arjuna Kankipati, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you in May to roll on with the Butt Kicker Sports Car Championship to see if anyone can stop Austin Young, Sean Campbell, or Chase Wilson.